Thank you, Egle, for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm very happy to come to see Lithuanian architecture up close, because we have featured many projects over the years. And personally, I have always had an interest on what is happening east. At the end, ArchDaily comes from a periphery where I'm going to show you, and I think that the borders is where we get the most perspective, and also are the places where there is most creativity. So I'm very happy to have come, and during these days also to see architecture. And now being invited to a conference that talks about fail, or ask this question, but that I want to address from showing something that didn't fail, but was faced many times with questions. And the decisions that we took on each of these questions gave us a certain direction to look at where architecture is today. And we think that it is in a very important moment of inflection, that it could fail or it can succeed. So I am an architect, and today I'm the editor-in-chief of an internet platform. And my responsibility is to be constantly looking at what is happening in the world, what is happening in society, what is happening in our industry, and translate that into the direction of ArchDaily, and at the end try to provide you, our users, architects, and a lot of people who care about architecture with what is happening. And this started in a very unstructured way. With my partner, the other David Basulto, in 2006, we met in university, and he asked me a very important question, very simple, very bold, but he said that through information we could improve the quality of life in cities. It's very abstract, very general, very bold, but I believe in that because I knew that the access to information was crucial. At the end, I was spending a lot of time in an architectural library, collecting books, learning about projects, learning about solutions, and of course that the internet was going to change that. That had a big cost. I had to work a lot to get the money to buy one book, 1-2 books per year. You will go to architects' offices and you will see a tremendous library. That is knowledge. And that was restricted because of cost. But it was obvious that the internet was going to change that. And if architects with better knowledge could do better architecture, we could have better quality of life in cities. Fast forward, ArchDaily reached up to 65 people with office in Santiago, Chile, in Mexico City, Mexico, in Bogotá, Colombia, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Beijing, China, and also team working from their homes in the US and in Europe. A couple of years ago, we merged into a new group that is called Daily, that is these 3 companies that you see, under the umbrella of NZZ, that is today the most influential media in Switzerland. And why a Chilean company joined this group in Europe is because we all think the same. We know that the biggest challenge that we have as humanity is the built environment, is cities, and that the media and platforms who are supporting this are very important. So for me, ArchDaily has always been a journey, because I'm an architect. I didn't study business, I didn't study leadership, and we had to do everything from scratch. But we have been exposed to learning how our industry is evolving, how the internet is bringing constant challenges. So we're in a super interesting mindset inside ArchDaily that is a constant learning. Because a journey is something that we all enter as architects. When you start your professional career, you never stop learning. You are out on the street, you visit a new place, and you're constantly absorbing, learning. So we're always in this never-ending journey. But in a practical way, ArchDaily is today the most used source of information for architects on the internet. It's used by more than 770,000 people in one day. And this is a lot. Try to dimension. For example, in Vilnius is around 600,000 people. Imagine that all these people pass through ArchDaily, through this digital square, every day. But for us, what is interesting, this comes from Chile. Probably you don't know much about this country. It's very lost. It's not known for any particular innovations. Our soccer team has only won the South American Cup. With this year, we didn't even make it to the World Cup. But why a network of this scale can come from such countries so disconnected? It is because of this that I really like when you go in Wikipedia and look architect. Why this image is so appealing to me? Of course that we no longer use the drawing board, we use desk with our computer, but because it talks about the globality, the global aspect of the architect. We learn in the same way, we practice very similarly, even our context is different, but the profession is very much the same, and we all need inspiration, and we are all learning from what we see from our other countries. So this image could be an architect in Vilnius, in Berlin, in Santiago, in Mumbai, everywhere. We all need the same, and we are very similar. So a network that could go global for architects was something possible. But on the other aspect, why so many people care about architecture? Why more than 700,000 people go to ArchDaily every day looking for inspiration, to share knowledge, solution? It is because of this. We are in the urban era, same as we had the Steel Age, the Bronze Age. Today we're in the era of cities. And we're becoming more aware about this. Perhaps for us architects this is obvious, but not for the rest of the world, the rest of society. Cities is where everything that we question today is happening. Inequality, scarcity of energy. Even the pandemic could only happen into a certain density. And that was our initial thesis. If architects would play a big role, and not the only, because we are in an ecosystem of different professions, different professionals, if we can do architecture slightly better, by scale, we're going to affect positively the quality of life of a lot of people. So we decided to apply what we call startup mindset. We move the knowledge that used to be on paper, and again, this is very obvious, to online, using free software, with a very flexible format. You know, a magazine can show you a project in 10 pages, 5 pages. We had an endless scroll. We could show it through videos, through diagrams, to animated GIFs, to interviews, in a very much more rich format. And also use the distribution of the internet. So we were taking this, that was the paper online, again, it's very obvious. But in this process, we noticed a few things. First, that all the sources of information that we were consuming about architecture were coming from what we call the developed countries. It was coming from the US, it was coming from Italy, it was coming from the UK, it was not coming from Chile. So in a way, it could have been even I don't know, like colonialistic kind of view. They will send this knowledge to the far end of Chile, and that is what we thought was good architecture, because there was no other kind of media, it was very unidirectional. But again, bidirectionality was something that the internet brought. So we started to do this, like an online architectural publication. We started to publish the projects from the architects that we knew, from our university, our former professors, and this started to grow very fast. And this gave us a clue that actually this was what people needed. But the most interesting started to happen through stories that architects were sharing through us. This is a video that we had a problem, but I will tell you what it's about. These were two young architects from Ecuador that were sharing. We were doing this very local kind of work with self-fabricated bricks, natural ventilation, and we think it's a very good building. And we wanted to show it to worldwide magazines. We started to send it, but nobody was paying attention. And then we were very lucky that ArchDaily published it, and it was something crazy because people from all over the world started to write to us. In short, these architects were featured in the Venice Architecture Biennial, in the Chicago Architecture Biennial. They were invited all over the world to show the work that they were doing with Run Earth. That became very interesting. So they started to share all these stories. Also said that for us was not only about, okay, ArchDaily is a platform that reaches a lot of people, so can give you this exposure. What was important for us from their story were two things. This was being done in Spanish, and most of the people that were contacting them were from Japan, Italy, the US, and those countries do not speak Spanish. So then we saw a very important thing, because when you are in the global south, you're used that the main sources of information are in English. So you need to learn English to have access to this information. But now the table was flipping, and somehow, I don't know, they were using Google Translate, they found that we had all this interesting architectural content, and they wanted to bring it into English. So then we saw how we started to become part of this global network of exchanging architecture, sharing it with others. And the other story that we abstract from this was that they were sending all this very interesting architecture, very local, But the magazines were not interested, because the magazines were in the business of selling photos. At the end, you need to have a very good photo for the cover of the magazine. As we were interested into the intrinsic value of this architecture, into the solutions, into how it was made, we didn't have that other deformation, we didn't have that limit. And that allowed us to bring a lot of architecture that was not part of the print magazines because it didn't have a good photo. So again, we were doing this from Chile, and I really like to show it because we are constantly thinking we're too far away, we're disconnected from the networks. In Chile, sometimes it's very hard to find access to good IT talent, it's very hard to establish networks. If you want to go to the centers of discussion, everything is more than 10 hours away. But I think that is a very good training because at the end forces you, pushes you. If you want to do it, you have to do an extra effort. So it's like going to the gymnasium, you develop another muscle. And on the other hand, in Chile there are I think that there are few resources, and that is a very good expression to architecture. If you have seen Chilean architecture, you're going to see these very raw kind of constructions in the middle of a beautiful landscape, but that rawness, that honesty about architecture is because you have to do more with less. You have to really be inventive about what you do. And I think that training, that was this mental attitude that we were doing our architecture platform, was very similar to the attitude that many of the architects that maybe you know today, like Smiljan Radic or Alejandro Aravena, went through. So this started to grow, and we started to become like citizens of the global world, being players on how we move architecture around. And the concept of globalization was always important for us, because sometimes you think that globalization is like the transposition of the North American model or the Western European model to the rest of the world. But for us, being in South America, we understood the value of being outside, of being on the edge. A lot of people during this growth became interested about ArchDaily. Investors that wanted to be part of this, and they were telling, bring ArchDaily to the US, maybe you need to have an office here in New York, here in California, you will have access to better talent, to more opportunities. But for us, this mental exercise of having to move and value our perspective was super important, because from here, we could really look at the world. Of course, that we developed a very strong network in the US, and I was always thinking, in the US, the world is the US. It's the largest economy, it's 300 million people. Of course, a lot of things going on, so you focus on the inside, but you really lost the perspective. So for ArchDaily, what is happening in the US, or what is happening in Iran, Paraguay, Indonesia, Thailand, or in Eastern Europe is as important as what is happening in the US or in the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. So we really, really value to have this perspective and to maintain it until today. So we were first in Spanish, we saw this like market need, and we launched ArchDaily in English, and it grew exponentially. And for us, this was very important, because we said, how can we make ArchDaily more, let's say, influential among people in the world of architecture? And my partner had a very good idea. He said, if we become the most visited website, and we can put this in as our slogan, people are going to understand the influence of ArchDaily. So we work very hard on building this distribution network, on making it grow as a platform, and we audit our traffic so we could have this, because then we thought everybody's going to understand it, and also for our business model, the clients are going to come to us. Of course, we were very innocent, because that doesn't happen on its own. We reached this milestone, and of course we could say something in a better way, but that required much more hard work, like business development. But over these years, we have accumulated a database of tens of thousands of projects that generate these monthly visits, millions of followers on social media. And these numbers I don't share to say, okay, ArchDaily is big, it's the scale, it's something that needs to continuously grow, but it's for this, because we really need to evolve. Imagine that I think that for most of you, Instagram is your source of inspiration, is how you see how others are thinking, what other architects are working on, and it's a visual network of exchange. So when that appeared, as ArchDaily, we had to say, okay, this is a path that we need to follow. And when many things are appearing on the internet, we need to take fast decisions, because if not, any system that stops growing decreases. So we think that if ArchDaily doesn't stay in a way up to date, it's going to happen the same that happened to the paper magazines. So we really need to constantly invest in how do we do and adapt. But how do we foster this growth? All these people that are working in this company on the technical development. At the beginning, with my partner, we were doing architecture. We were doing interiors, we were doing urban plans, and we said, this requires a lot of detail. If we want to be good at doing architecture, we need to go very deep. We cannot be doing ArchDaily and architecture on the side and teaching in university. So we said, we like doing ArchDaily more, so let's find a way to make it work as a business, so we dedicate 100% of our time. And what happened? When we were designing and building at the beginning, because in Chile, when you graduate, after 6 years, you are licensed and you can build. But we knew that we didn't know anything about construction, so we were asking everybody. And through ArchDaily, we know many architects. So then you were asking, hey, who was your structural engineer? How did you do this particular ceiling? And then we understood in the world of architecture, we're constantly asking our colleagues, we're seeing what others are doing, and we try to get recommendations. So we thought very easily, we found that all these recommendations were on ArchDaily, because a good project by a good architect, you can trust that the material decisions and the specialists that they are working for in one particular project are trusted decisions. If Herzog and de Meuron are working with Saint-Gobain for this glass, for this building, you can think this is a good decision. So we created a database of the architectural products that are being used on each project. So then, what is the virtuous cycle of ArchDaily? Architects are presented their work in ArchDaily, who at the same time are bringing all these product recommendations, on which we invite the manufacturers to load their products on ArchDaily, and that gives us the resources to improve our service, to deliver better tools for architects, and that is what makes it grow. Because something that we understood is that on the internet you have different types of platforms. You have fulfilling platforms and you have discovery platforms. Of course that, with Volt, Uber Eats, or the platform that you have in each country, you can have anything that you want in 1 hour. But this is something that you need to know that you want. These platforms are not able to put an idea or a desire in your head. Those are the inspiration networks like Instagram, like Pinterest, like ArchDaily. Sometimes a client will come with a project and you're going to review everything that you have been looking in the last years, all those ideas that you stored, and that aha moment will come when you're looking into something that interests you. Maybe you're looking into a wooden building and you're going to say, I want to do something with laminated wood. And at ArchDaily, we connect you in that moment with those materials. And at the end, we create a curated context, because in a way, this, let's say, advertising is not that we're choosing it, but actually it's architects who are validating that these are good projects. So in this journey, we started in Spanish, then in English, and then always comes the question, why you launch ArchDaily Brazil, ArchDaily Mexico, ArchDaily China, and not ArchDaily Germany, ArchDaily UK, like ArchDaily in big economies. And this for us was very interesting because, as I told you, ArchDaily has been a journey in which we have met many architects through interviews, bringing what they do online. But for sure that in this stage, this was one of the most influential because he really put us into another of these questions. One day, through our metrics, we started to see that many Chinese sites were duplicating, cloning our content. We had Chinese copies. And of course, that with our Western perspective of copyright, they were stealing. So all these Chinese sites, we started to send them letters like, stop stealing our content, or we're going to hire a lawyer or do something. But of course, it was impossible. At the end, I think we were more angry than nothing. Nothing was there to be done. But one day we had the opportunity to go for the first time to China when the Pritzker Prize was being delivered to Guangzhou in the Red Square, a very political ceremony, a very important moment for architecture. But before going, with my partner, we sent an email to this guy who is the owner of ArchGo, which is the largest ArchDaily clone in China. And the guy who never answered our threads, but we said, hey, we're going to China, let's meet. He immediately answered, and this was our photo. This is the first thing that we did after arriving to Beijing, meet this guy. Because with my partner, we were very angry, like, Wang, stop stealing. This guy was amazing because he was not only an architect, he had a master in computer science, and he was finishing his PhD in architecture, and he showed us everything. He had done a software to extract the structured content of ArchDaily, and his students were translating to Chinese. He was selling ArchDaily DVDs year by year. He even developed an Ecotech energy analysis plugin, and he was selling it through this website because he had many users. He had a big business operation. And when we said this, he told us something incredible, because at the end he said, okay, this is your content, and if you want, take the translations. But ArchDaily is a very useful resource. And here there are a lot of new students of architecture, and this is how we consume knowledge. We do it online. But here people don't speak English, so somebody has to do this translation. And that moment for us was super important, because you read that China grows and everything, but we were there. We were seeing the first Chinese architecture Pritzker Prize. We were seeing a city that didn't stop building, and we were seeing the amount of architects that was going at that time from 80,000 to 800,000. And to them, internet didn't arrive as computers, it arrived in phones. So everything was different as we were seeing. And if there was one place in the world where ArchDaily and its mission had to be, it was in China. And we were not seeing it. We thought that being in English was being global. But this guy really opened up our eyes that if we wanted to be really global, we had to be in Chinese. And since that year, we started working hard, because it's not easy to do it in China, because we are media for China. And we started with ArchDaily in Chinese. And at this time, we started also to become aware of that perhaps the future of urbanization and what we call like the brick economies, again, was not just the transposition of the North American model or the Western Europe model to the rest of the world. And the big needs for architecture were happening here. I really like this viral image of the internet that says there are more people living inside the circle than outside of it. In North Europe, you even have decrease of population. And that is very strange, because as I told you, any system that goes down is facing a potential collapse. And this is why most architects from the world during the late 90s and early 2000s were going east. All the major architecture offices went there because there were not enough architects. And somebody had to take this tremendous opportunity. India, Indonesia, or China, Vietnam are going through a super rapid process. But we were also able, from our perspective, to see the change. Because now I was telling you, in a way, the West was exporting architecture east, all these opportunities. But at the same time, a new generation started to grow. And where you have necessities, you have innovation. And we started to see this, that this is the architecture from Indonesia, this is what is being done in bamboo. In very few years, they did all the mechanical testing and started to use it, not just as a, let's say, low economy kind of material, but it became the dominant material. Like $1 million houses done in bamboo, everything from the faucets to the structure. Again, Indonesia, this is architecture in Vietnam, or this in Iran. What is happening today in Iran in terms of brick is completely, for me, out of the box. At the end, Iran, which is a country with so many restrictions that they cannot import materials, they have a different kind of industry, and they have to do the most with the material that has always been there, and they take it to a complete different extreme thanks to this necessity, that this need that pushes them to be more innovative. And what I'm most happy about is that this is what you're seeing on ArchDaily every day. ArchDaily is a stream Of course, you can go and search for something that you need, but every hour you're going to see a building that is completely unexpected, that probably is coming from this context, that probably is coming from a more structured kind of context, but at the end, it's giving you inspiration. For me, when an architect from the US told me, David, I never thought that architecture from Vietnam was going to inspire me. What they are doing there is so free, it's so open, the use of materials. Then I understood that these bridges that we were building across the internet, we were putting ideas into people's mind, and that was very powerful, and that we had a responsibility to do it properly, that our curation was super important. But as a platform, it was not only about us. We were empowering all these architects. The same story that I told you about this architect from Ecuador that had something with a lot of potential, and thanks of going global, it allowed him to take his knowledge further. This is happening to many architects. Many architects on ArchDaily being exposed to opportunities. Somebody who is a specialist on certain field, or somebody who's looking for an architect to do something. But again, this is not like a catalog to choose architects, because architecture, I think, is changing. I told you this in a structured way, but at the beginning was just intuition, passion, really wanted to do this. We had this sharing spirit, this networking spirit, but eventually we had to put it on a mission. And our daily mission is to improve the quality of life of the billions of people that are going to move into cities by providing inspiration, knowledge, and tools to the architects who are going to face this challenge. But very recently, we found that this mission is a bit obsolete, because we understood that this is not only about architects. A lot of people are entering into architecture, and I want to share you about that. Of course, that the world population growth is completely out of scale. Probably you have already seen this type of graphic, or the type of diagnostic for the future. How many new cities of more than 1 million people are going to appear every week in the world? And the question of architecture in relation to this graphic is not only the amount of houses that we build, the amount of hospitals, the type of infrastructure, but has to do with how we're going to live as millions of people together. If it is already a challenge, how this is going to continue as cities are really, really growing. My city, I always thought it was small, Santiago. It's 8 million people. And now that we're talking about all these challenges of the future of megapolis, I usually go to Mexico City, that is 20 million people, or to Sao Paulo, where we also have an office that is also 18 million people. So these things are already happening in the world, but in some places, these are new phenomena. So how are we going to live together as millions of people? How we're going to develop our relations? How we're going to find opportunities? Cities can be drivers of development. Of course, that the density allows us to be close, to gain from each other, but also can become places of inequality. Perhaps in Europe you don't see this much, but this is what one would call typical Latin American city. Or this image, perhaps big part of the population that is going to live in urban settlements are going to live into self-construction, into informal city. And this is strange because, of course, we say this is negative, but sometimes the social tissue in these settlements is much more rich. People are really supporting each other, and people are looking for innovation or looking how to solve their daily needs. And probably here there are not so many resources, but there is one thing that for sure covers 100% of them, that is internet access through their phones. And people, when they have a need, they're going to find a solution. And we are seeing that there is a certain shift in our audience, because before ArchDaily was by architects for architects, but the amount of architects and architecture students in number continues to grow, but in percentage is reducing. At the beginning for us this was very strange because we say we're doing something wrong. But no, it is because actually architecture is needed by more people. The other challenge in this growth has to do with identity. Of course, that we move between the danger of globalization is that everything in the world starts to look the same. But I'm very happy to see that at the same time it's appearing like a counterculture in which is giving a new perspective into local identity. Local identity, local materials, and I think that you are aware of this. You are now seeing that architecture can be much more expressive of its context as it was 10 years ago when we were repeating the same business tower all over the world. And the other question, and I think that with the pandemic was much more clear, is how fast our ways of living are changing in comparison to how static sometimes buildings can be. Now we went through building massive amounts of square foot of office that today are empty. Now we're living as cooperatives, as co-living, in many different ways. So that is really another pressing question for architecture. But if we can summarize all of this, I think that the challenge for architecture is scalability. Today we have seen that many technologies have completely changed our life. Technologies that in a way became accessible because they could scale. The benefits of having a smartphone or the benefits of having a network in which you're connected to thousands of people, we see the positive aspect of that. But how can architecture address the same? I believe that the equation of architecture is very complex because at the end, if you have an architecture office, you need, for X amount of people, you need to build a certain number per hour to maintain your office. And then you translate this cost into doing architecture. Usually that equation makes architecture expensive. So if you want to work with an architect to do your own house, you have to pay a big price. Otherwise, how architecture reaches you? Through repetition. In a housing project, the cost of architecture is spread, but that is something that also as consumers we're questioning because we all want that everything is custom made to us and technology enables us to do it. But why architecture not? And many times I hear this question from people who are starting to work on a project, who are not architects, and they say, why architecture has to be so unpredictable, so uncertain, so complex, so expensive? It is because I think that we are still not achieved this type of scalability. And if we look back, this is something that happened to architecture. Modernism appeared in a moment where the world was at a crossroads. We were really questioning where we were going. In the afterward, we needed to build a lot of houses in the afterward to rebuild Europe, or in America with the population growth. And of course that we could not do it as we were doing architecture in the past. We had to rationalize things and we need to start doing repetition and we had to embrace a new spirit. The Bauhaus was that. How to bring new solutions using a new way of thinking. We tried to repeat, to use modular construction, of course that this is something that you know very well, but also we started to embrace a new way of thinking. We were doing these complex machines. Why houses could not be like this? And then comes this phrase from Le Corbusier, the house as a machine for living in. We started to embrace the machine, lines of production, and we were inspired by planes and by boats, by ships, to bring that into architecture. And for sure that we also try to systematize everything, to have systems that we could replicate, that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again. And for sure that this brought a jump into architecture. But after that, I don't think that it changed so much. And we see it, we are even the basis of architecture education today, we still go into this. We still have not been far enough. And construction and architecture have been on this, I would say, like kind of terrace. Of course, it has evolved, but it's not like technology. Today, we are assembling cars with robots, and we're still moving bricks from one side to another using our hands. But if we look at it in perspective compared to other industries, this is a matrix of the level of digitalization in different industries. So of course at the top you have IT, professional services, finance, insurance, where digitalization has really changed everything. Today you no longer have insurance broker that is trying to sell you an insurance. You go online, you do it with a very competitive price. The margins have lower, consumers are empowered, and at the bottom of the spectrum, as the less digitalized industries, we have architecture and construction. And this is not a pessimistic view, it's actually very hopeful, because this means that unlike in the industries in the top, where everything has been already done and is very competitive, in architecture and construction there is everything to be done. And like for the world of venture capital, construction and architecture is the next Wild West. It's like the internet in the 90s, because it's not easy. It's not like in the other industries where it's only code. Here also has to do with the atoms, with the physical. And it has taken time, but now we're in the perfect crossroad to make that happen. It is the importance of the city. It is the built environment. The pandemic pushed us into accelerating many decisions, and now with the tremendous energy crisis, we're really being forced to be efficient. An architecture, if we look at it in a very simplistic way, goes from idea, goes from inspiration, from learning, for exchanging, working as a team, developing a project, doing the design phase, the project delivery, the construction drawings, going into the construction site, and then having a building. And all of you know that each interaction along this chain is highly inefficient. There is a lot of loss, not only, let's say, in terms of software. When you do your project in BIM, you try to integrate a lot. But here you have a lot of inefficiency, disconnection, opaque, you don't know prices. When you go into construction site, you have to assume a tremendous overhead or loss of things. So this is super, super inefficient. And even after the building has been done, you have you're very disconnected from its life cycle. But today, there are appearing many technologies along this cycle that are trying to solve this problem, that are trying to integrate, that are trying to replace physical things. And I'm very happy to see how architects are seeing this as another path. Not only doing buildings, but developing the technology or the processes or the system to help other architects to do more and better. I really like this statement from Balfour Beatty. It's an infrastructure consultancy here in Europe that says that in 2050, the construction site will be human-free. And this is very strange, because is it a utopia or a dystopia? When we go to a construction site, we see a lot of activity. And perhaps now that we're facing a big recession, construction is going to be the way out of it, of generating a lot of jobs, economical movement. But also the rising cost of labor puts a lot of incentives on saying maybe we need to develop robots for doing this task, maybe we need to prefab, have better control of the system, and assemble on site. And this is going to happen. Again, to have machines overseeing construction site is not something new, it's already happening. You can control the process of pouring concrete on a slab in a much controlled way. You can improve it, you can make it fail-proof. And at the same time, you can even track the workers on how they are doing their work. It's a bit scary, but we're seeing this happening in our contemporary society. Drones are already improving processes, reducing risk, or the endless question of when are we going to be able to print houses? This is already happening. It's happening in the US, it's happening here in Europe, it's happening in this way with concrete, but it's also happening with earth, with soil. Or automated construction. Now there are experiments being done, but when a robot is able to do one bridge, that it does 1, or 1,000 is trivial, or 1,000 custom. So with all this embedded technology, what is also happening is that the interfaces are becoming much more easy to use. Think that 20 years ago, efficient or good architecture office was measuring the amount of draft people that they had and how fast they could do architectural drawings. Then 30 years ago. Then we had CAD, and an office could be measuring the amount of draftsmen doing drawings. Fast forward to today, an office of 2 people can do everything thanks to technology. You don't even need specialists doing rendering, because with real-time rendering, you're doing the architecture, you're doing the model, and you have everything at once. And the interfaces are becoming so easy to use that people who are interested about architecture, who are not architects, are able to use this kind of software and start to, let's say, enter into a common ground with architecture. And here's where I open the next part that has to do with the democratization of architecture. Before I was saying that the equation of architecture makes it very expensive, makes it hard to relate to, hard to acquire, hard to obtain. But this is becoming a very transversal question, because society is aware that the built environment is critical. But at the same time, people want to engage with architecture, and maybe we don't see this in a very clear way, but for me it's very clear when you go into Netflix and you see that there are so many shows on how to live. And Netflix does their, let's say, editorial lineup through data. So they understand what society wants to watch, and it is how to live in small spaces, how to live in the nature, the world's most beautiful houses. But the question of living is becoming a transversal topic. Even if you look at the Pinterest top trends for the year, many have to do on how we're living. Calming classrooms, biophilic design, architecture for pets. So this is becoming a real transversal question, and during the pandemic, we saw this increase into the need for interior design, because people were spending more time inside. I started to question why this works in this way, why I don't have enough light. I want to take action and I want to change something. How can I do it? Who can help me? Is an architect that is going to has to charge me like this amount of price per hour? Is it something that I can do? Is there an app that can help me do that? This is not new, because modular construction, prefabricated houses is something that has existed for a long time, and probably this answers the question why architecture cannot have a fixed price. But I think it's really bringing the question that many things today we want them to be as a product. Can architecture be as a product? And for this, I think we need to understand, because there is a big need. People want to engage with architecture, but they want to do it in an informed way, in an empowered way, and in a different way. And if we don't understand that, I think we're going to face a big risk. As architects, I'm happy that we have been quick to understand the real needs. For example, now we understand that perhaps the best building is the one that we don't need to build. We need to put a lot of focus into the energy footprint, into the materials that we use, into the life cycle of our building. But we need to understand these other needs, how people want to engage with architecture, because if not, what people call the existential threat. Is going to happen the same as travel agents, the same as taxi drivers, the same as people in retail, the same as people in banks. And of course that this is a very long forward question, because one could say technology is never going to replace the architect, because we're creative, we listen, we have many positive skills for the world today. I think that today the world's largest companies are creation companies, are companies of human capital. And I'm very happy to see that many architects are going to work in Facebook or in Google, but not to design facilities, to design products, to design interfaces, and to bring something that is very, very valuable from the architectural thinking. We are systemic listeners. We have the power of abstraction. We have a problem-solving approach, and we can coordinate different specialists to solve a problem. And that today is very valued in the world of technology. But going to this question of, can technology replace an architect? of course, I still say no. But a few months ago, I saw some guy on Twitter, a developer who's not an architect, who's called Peter Levels, who said, I took all the photos of houses from ArchDaily and I trained a model for this project that is called This House Does Not Exist. And that start generating images that you asked. This, I think I asked for a house in Namibia. And I look at it and I say, looks like what I would have in my mind about a house in Namibia. And this AI will even write you, sorry, it was Nigeria, a modern home in Nigeria that incorporates nature with exposed wood and stone. And this model will even write the project description. It's like an automated ArchDaily in a way. But of course that with this image, I cannot do anything. It's not that I can build a house starting from this. There are many endless decisions that need to be taken by a professional or a group of specialists to make this real. And we're far from this. Maybe one day we will reach. But this guy, I really like because he understood what was doing was fun. But nobody is going to use this for something practical. So he pivoted. And 2 weeks after, he used this same training for this model to do a project that is called Interior AI. You upload a photo of your room, and he gives you back your room like in 40 different styles. And I really like because this guy was documenting everything that he was doing. And he started to charge for this, like $30, you upload your photo, you receive all these 40 styles for $30. And he was getting like 100 people paying per week. And started to grow, and it was incredible because people who probably were not able to work with a decorator or with an interior designer were getting this service. And it's very, very accurate. I don't have the video to show this, but go and look for it. This house does not exist, and the Interior AI. But the thing is that at the same time, he started to share many emails from people from real estate saying, with you, we no longer need to hire photographers for our projects. Or interior designers saying, you are killing my work. Can I work with you? So this is really something that happens so fast, with so strange result, and that brings again that question, is technology going to change what we do as architects? For sure it will. But what we need to do is to rethink which is our role, because perhaps it's not doing many mechanical tasks that we're doing today, and it is to put our valuable human brain into the questions that matter. But also to understand how we, with technology, can take architecture to much more people in an efficient way, because the world needs it. And I really like this question, because what is going to be the future of the architect? Are we going to be an app? Probably in big part, yes. But what I find important is that this is something that we do, that we translate architectural thinking into a scalable system, and we can fulfill that question, that how we can, through architecture, improve the quality of life of a lot of people. And to motivate you, especially if you are a young architect and you are thinking, what should I do next? The whole world understands that this is as I say, the Wild West. The amount of venture capital into construction tech is growing like exponentially. And these are just little examples, because really there are thousands of architecture startups that are trying to solve one very specific problem along the chain of architecture and construction. And we're even seeing a new breed of architects that is called architecture. I was very surprised when I went to San Francisco, to Silicon Valley, and a friend told me, Tricky, we need to go to this meetup of architecture. You're going to love it. I had no idea about this, and we go to this meeting. I was very interested because it was a big group of people, like 50, and they were doing introductions, like, okay, I'm John, I'm working Autodesk. Or I am Peter, and I work in Google, and I'm an architect. I work in Facebook, I did masters in architecture. And everyone was saying this, but at the end they were saying, okay, and I work in Facebook, but I don't build. I work in Facebook, but I have never done a building. And they were like very disappointed. I was very strange to see, because we do all this tremendous effort towards doing a construction. And for many people, perhaps they were having a much broader impact working in a tech company than doing a house. It was very interesting to understand how they were thinking and also to see how all this knowledge could be used by others. And I really recommend you this community, architektors.org, and has a Slack channel, and you can find a lot of people who are interested about this, looking for opportunities and connecting. And to close, I want to show you who is, for me, perhaps the most influential architect today. This is Evan Sharp, and he's the founder of Pinterest, and he's an architect. And this was also a very interesting conversation because this is a network that is used by billions. It's one of the top 5 tech companies in the world. And this guy was an architect, and you understand, if you use Pinterest, it's what we do every day. Putting creative ideas to look at the big picture and taking decisions. And an architect took this that is very from the design world to a mass audience. And also in his profile, he put ex-architect, and I ask you why you're putting ex-architect if what you're doing is a creation of architecture and it's perhaps the most successful one of contemporary times. So with this, I want to put you to this gray situation because I think that this is not a binary world anymore. We know that many things are changing, and the boundaries of architecture are also this. Architecture is no longer this rigid limit, architects, we do this, but rather we are into this in definition, I think, in a positive way of what we can do, and I think that we can take this as an opportunity. So if we take this good opportunity, we're not going to fail. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It was very interesting. I'd like to ask our audience if somebody has a question for David.
Thank you very much for your talk. You have a very democratic mission statement, but do you see yourself as a gatekeeper of what good architecture is? Because inevitably, by making decisions who goes on your site, who doesn't, you influence what is considered valid or validated. So how do you deal with that responsibility? Thank you.
Yeah, it's like a paradox because, as you say, we create, let's say, a difference or a limit, and we put that as a responsibility. And when I was talking about democratization, I took it, let's say, for the consumer side, but we take that as something internally very important because at the end we say anybody could be in ArchDaily if this project adds something to another architect, and we need to understand the wide landscape that can mean because. For example, at the very beginning, we were thinking, we need to publish commercial interiors because probably this is the work that most young architects do and it's not very well documented. They could appear in decoration magazines, interior magazines, but those magazines do not publish details or sections. On the other end of the spectrum, we became obsessed to show complex programs because, for example, there are not so many, or at that time, there were not so many examples of good airports, at least in what we call aesthetics or design. But we felt that we need to show how airports are being designed, how hospitals are being designed, because that technical part could be useful for other architects that probably don't have access to this. On the other hand, we really value the diversity inside the team of ArchDaily, and every time that we open a new position in relation to the curation of projects, we try to maintain the global distribution. I know it's hard, and I think we are never going to fully achieve it because it's a constant paradox that what appears on ArchDaily has this limit, or even that what appears on ArchDaily is already obsolete or these things, but being aware of that keep us pushing.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask you a bit, because you were talking about this, in the end you made the reference to artificial intelligence and generated images and all this stuff. But given that you're talking itself, ArchDaily, it's a platform that you say provide us with all this information that is free for us, and we get to be inspired and all of this. But there's also this new trend that I heard recently about the open source design. No longer about sharing, let's say, the project itself as an inspiration, but as a plan, as a section, as a facade with the measurements, with everything included. This was exclusively concentrated for markets of printing, like wood printing, laser cutting, and all these prefabricated kind of structures. So do you think if we took this to a greater scale, of course, for a business of architecture, let's say you made a hospital in a developed city that has solved a lot of issues that probably by knowledge and expertise in a less developed country would not be achievable by the local architects or constructors. If you uploaded it as a free, open source kind of a resource, not just as we show you here the plans, without the measurements, without the logic of it, without the understanding of it, but literally as a catalog kind of product, as you were saying, the product itself, in a way, it will probably enhance people's lifestyle in the place. It will bring more quality of buildings. But of course, it's something that cannot happen, as you were saying, because it will harm probably drastically the business of architecture itself. But do you think, as a hypothetical question, so that it would rather do more good than bad, or it would be the other way around? That's kind of...
Yeah, no, this is, I think, super interesting because there are people trying to take this angle, wiki architecture, or people who are providing furniture for interiors that you will download, cut, and do, and we say this is something that needs to continue happening. I think this is a need, and of course that brings this threat because you say the embedded cost of the design, you did one, and it's the same as doing 1,000. And you're not going to get paid for each of these. But this is changing fast because now we're having all this, and we're going to show this soon. The NFTs try to bring embedded into the system something like royalty. Is it going to be that solution to solve the problem that when you make something for a lot of people that you cannot get the economical upside of that? And I think it's going to be solved in a way with that. Now, what we're going to share soon in ArchDaily is that a group of Finnish architects who are doing little cabins and they are selling it as a digital file, as an NFT, and you can buy it and that gives you the right to build it. And if you resell that file, the architect is going to get a commission. I think it's a very linear kind of thinking, but I think that the deep question is, are we going to be able to reproduce architecture at a scale that solves so many people need, and how is that going to be retributed to us? And I don't know, but it's going to happen. I don't think that we can. It's the same as in other industries. We have seen the tremendous chaos that, for example, has been car sharing or these car platforms across the world. In France, people were burning cars on the streets. In other countries, people were attacking the drivers. So of course that when it endangers an industry, you can go to such extremes. I don't think that we're going to go to such into architecture, but it's something, and that is why I try to bring this question today, because I think that we need to take, let's say, the driver's seat into this problem and not wait for the world of technology to bring the solution, because we see that the world of technology in many industries is producing this like cannibalization. Now we're all questioning, we're giving all our data to Facebook, they're profiting from that, and what do we get? And now we're getting upset about it, we're leaving the platforms, but the platforms give us so much that we cannot just leave. So I do believe that architecture is going to reach that moment in that, because there is a need. People need architecture at a scale, need those solutions in an approachable way. Is people going to pirate architecture? I think that if it was possible, people will already be doing it. And probably with technology, we're going to reach that moment, and it's important that we we as architects drive that development. And again, don't wait for the technology companies to bring us the solution and take what we say is ours. I don't think I answered your question very properly, but you leave me with a more deep question in my mind.
Okay, thank you.